Back at the Vice today, and we are going 100% synthetic. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to SDG. Another lure build today, but we're going not au naturel. We are actually going 100% synthetic. You know I love laser dub. This is my selection of laser dub among some other colors. And I have recently, I don't know, would you say seen the light? Maybe? I don't know. I'm open, more open than I ever have been, to going back to the beginning when I was creating lures, and I had some stuff called craft fur. Didn't like it then, got rid of it all, but I'm slowly creeping my way back into that world. I have officially gone out and bought a second batch. I have black, seemed fitting to get some white. So we will be using craft fur today as our tailing material. I have in mind a Chartreuse Sexy Shad Finesse swim jig using craft fur for the tail, laser dub and polar UV polar chenille as the body. And all on a big, stout VMC 2-aught jig hook. Let's jump right into it, and I'll show you how to build this thing. So in the vise, we've got a 3/16 ounce freestyle jig head that is on the VMC 2-aught Barbarian hook that I mentioned earlier, jig hook. This is using some nice upgraded eyes as well. Those are living eyes in the ice pattern. Pretty cool. They've got 4 different ones: ice, earth, wind, and fire, I think. But I think this is a nice blend for the ice pattern. Of course, it's a pearl white color head. We'll be tying with 210 denier, flat wax nylon, and white. So let's go ahead and lay a thread base down. My scissors go. Take this all the way back just before the bend, and then if you've seen any of the channel or any of the other videos on the channel, you know that when I do tailing material on crappie jigs or stuff like this, I always flip it over. I just like the look. I like how it lays in there better than putting it on the bottom. So, craft fur. This is extra select, so extra select from Hairline White. I want to get the maximum length out of this stuff, so I have cut from the very top, and I've cut a pretty good chunk of it. Did it on purpose. I want a nice size tail, but I also want to show you guys, just because this is synthetic doesn't mean you still don't need to clean out the shorts. So I cut it all the way down here at the base. I actually cut a little bit too much and took some of the backing as well. What I ended up with is this. All right, so you can see a big fluff or a big poof ball back here, but it's got a natural taper to it. Love a tapered tail, right? We don't want a paintbrush that goes back and just cuts off. But this is really thick and fuzzy. We need to clean this out. Just like you would do with bufftail, it's fuzzy. It's got a lot of shorts in it. So go to Walmart, get you a really cheap comb, right? I mean, you can do it with the expensive stuff too. Pinch it at a spot where you don't want to lose any, right? If we pinch way up here, we're going to lose it all, or a bunch. So pinch it in a spot where you don't want to lose any. Put the fin in, and just pull. See that? Got all of that out there. Now I've got the back end of the longest fibers. Just because it's synthetic doesn't mean that there's still not an under fur that we need to clean up. From a sizing perspective, this should be about 1.5 to 2x long, or as long as the jig. Flip it over here, take the end of that tip, end of the tail. Here's the eye, and right there. So I've got a 2x long tail. I like to split it right down the middle, come around the hook, and move it back as far as I can. Pinch it. Sometimes I use my other finger there too, just to hold the material in place. Get 3 wraps, and then you can adjust. Just like bucktail, you're going to lose a couple along the way, not a big deal. I'm going to come back to about that flat part of the bend and bring it forward. There we go. Now we can clean it up a bit. Beautiful. So nice long tail, well past even the material clip on my vise here. So I'm going to add flashabou to the tail, but not until I put our first layer of body material down. Chartreuse Sexy Shad is what we're going for. So it's going to be a pearl bottom and a blue top. So I've got a pearl white in laser dub, and then this one here is that kingfisher blue that I've used on the channel before. So let's geek out for a second. This is supposed to mimic a baitfish, minnow, shad, obviously, Chartreuse Sexy Shad. So when you start building a jig, when I start building a jig, and I start thinking about what materials I want to use, how I want to apply those materials, those are all important things, what colors I want to use, but just as important is volume as well as silhouette, or in this case, taper. So not only taper in the tail, where it gets thinner the longer it goes, but you got to think through, what does a baitfish look like? So as you put your materials in, you should be thinking through the general silhouette, or the size, the general shape of the bait that you're after, as well as the proportion that best represents that shape. So if we got a whole lot of material just in the back, and it tapered down to a nose, and it was just like this triangle and then a tail sticking out of the back, yeah, we've applied all of our materials, but it doesn't represent the silhouette, the shape of the forage that we're trying to mimic. So this first little, it's almost like a tail cover before we get into the main part. It's going to be, so you have the nose of the fish that comes up to the shoulders. That shoulder area is going to be typically the biggest and the widest, so the shoulder, and then it starts to taper back down and on into the tail. So this is going to be the very end. Therefore, the amount of material that we're going to use at this juncture is going to be slightly less than the amount that we would use in the middle of the bait. And then the front will be kind of that mixture, right? Because you got fish with wide heads or bigger heads, you can kind of afford a little bit more material in the front. So let me grab a bit of this laser dub. Beautiful thing about this synthetic stuff, this laser dub, you manipulate it with your hands. You can control how long the eventual fibers are going to be simply by actually pinching, pulling, and you'll actually break it, and you can shorten it, right? While still retaining that natural taper at the end. So we don't want to just take this, cut it in the middle, then we got this flat side on both ends, and then fold it over or something like that. You've got, it's not going to look as natural as it should or could. So I've got a little piece here, just like that, right? Not very much material at all. It's going to go on the bottom, so flip the jig over, pull some line out, or some thread out rather, and I'm going to wrap this around. So every time I get some laser dub out, I'm thinking about half of that amount is the length that it's going to sit on the jig. And also, if you're thinking, well, how do I gauge how much volume of this synthetic material do I have, or any material really, but certainly the synthetic material, as you wrap it around the hook, you can see the length of what's around, I'm sorry, I said hook, around the thread. You can see the length, how wide that is around the thread, to get kind of a gauge of how bulky that material is. So this is just about right. I need to move the thread back though, closer to the back. There we go. Now wrap it around, make sure it's even, and just put it right down on top. couple of wraps to secure. So you can kind of get a sense of how long that tail cover is versus the tail itself. So now let's do the same thing with some of the white, or I'm sorry, some of the blue. So got this, gonna manipulate it. I'm just grabbing it and pulling from one side and kind of stacking it, right? Grabbing it, stacking it until it looks good to me. I don't have any extra long pieces. If I do, I can just break them off. I never cut it, so if I don't like it, I can just kind of pull it out. See that? Set it to the side, no big deal. Less is more, because we're going to have multiple layers on this. So less is more as you build, and if it's really, really short or really, really sparse, you can always just grab a tiny little bit more and add more. But I promise it builds up pretty quick. So do the same here. Put it right there on top. Secure it down. So I can see that this part is a little bit longer, right? And I can just kind of gently pull this end and it just pulls right out. Very nice, very, very easy to work with, this stuff. So I'm going to pull this out, see if I can, I'll do it up here, and just push this blue part down, splitting the hook. So there you go. Alright, so from there, now we're ready for the flashabou. I've got some pearl flashabou here. So I've already cut 2 strands. You go 2, 3, whatever you want. I'm going to put it on its side, find roughly the middle, thereabouts, and just place it right there on the side. Doing that tail cover first helps give a bit of a platform for the flashabou to sit on. So I'm going to grab it, turn it over. Now I want to trap it with the thread right there and then bring it back right down the middle. There you go. Cinch this up a little bit. There. Bingo. And then those can go in the material clips if you've got one on the back of your vise. If you don't, just get a little hair clip. You can do it that way. Alright, so from there it's time to tie in our polar UV polar chenille. This is also in pearl. I chose it because I don't want the polar chenille to add a lot of color per se to the jig. So this pearl is pretty translucent, gives a nice reflection, but it doesn't add a lot of color. I really want the laser dub to carry the load when it comes to color. So just place that on there. Come bring the thread all the way back to where the laser dub stops, and then bring it forward about halfway up, and I like to put a little half hitch right there. We'll bring our cradle around and hang this up. I'm going to use the rotary function to wrap this. You could do it, you don't have to have that, you can do it by hand if you prefer. So make sure that that first wrap is right at the base of that laser dub. You don't want a gap between the two. So right at the base. Matter of fact, I went back a little bit just to make sure I caught it on the white there as well. And then try not to trap. You'll always trap a little bit, but bring it right up to where you tied off your thread. That looks pretty good. 2 behind, 2 in front, or even 3. Now normally I would cut it here. I'm actually going to put this back in the material clip because we're going to continue on with it. If you've seen the zip tie series where I tied the Foxy SMCs, that was using very similar design using Arctic foxtail. We did the same thing. Put the polar chenille in, don't cut it, and then just clip it off because we'll continue on with it. So from there, it's rinse and repeat. Only now we're about halfway through, so it's going to be a little bit more material. Still not a ton, because this is going to have 3 layers of body material and 1 extra layer right at the head to fill in that gap. Just messing with it, making sure I have a nice taper on both sides. That should do. That. A little bit more than the tail, still not a ton. When I wrap it around, you can see how much wider that band is on the thread itself to give me kind of an indication. So I'm going to put it right where I tied off. You can also at this point make sure that your length is okay, and even the volume. You can kind of pull it back before you lock it into place and compare it to the tailing material. It should go, see me pulling out some there, it should go anywhere from about half to maybe 3/4. The very tail end, the tip of that taper should go about that long. That'll give us a nice smooth transition of material. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to lock that in place, flip it over, and do the same thing with the blue. So bring it around, double it over. There you go. So, and secure that in place. Looks good. Now, from here, our first little extra, we're going to go to the side, and I'm going to pull just the smallest amount of chartreuse. Just want a little highlight on the side. So there it is. Not very much at all. Very wispy, very small amount, right? And get that around. I could have actually gone maybe even with a little less. Let's see if I can get this for you guys. So I got it on the side. I want to put it right down the middle. So that looks good. Now let's do it again on the other side. Alright, there you go. So it looks like it's segmented, right? It looks like it's all blocky, right? One piece, one piece, one piece, one piece. Trust me, once we get to the end, we brush it all out, it blends really nice, it's going to work out. So just trust the process. So from here, we want to pull our polar chenille, and it's right, see that? It's right underneath of that side. So just kind of pull it up. Oh, got ahead of myself. Advance this thread, get it out of your way, right up to the head. Go ahead and half hitch there. And let's get it on the cradle. Now we're ready. So I'm going to pull that straight forward just so it doesn't crinkle anything or get anything out of place as much as possible. There we go. And start wrapping. Again, I want to cover my wraps, try to get it right back to where your laser dub ended. And we want to take this all the way to the head, just like that. 2 in the back, 2 around the front. Just follow that head. 3. I always say 2 and do 3. I don't know. Now we do want to cut it off. So we're done with our polar chenille. And from here, I'm going to just push these fibers back and wrap back over top of them. I want to go back about 1/8 of an inch or so, because we've got a couple of things to do at the head. The first of which is to put another layer of laser dub in. So this one is going to be sort of between the first one and the second one. So we don't want as much as the second one, but we want more than the first one. Alright, so that to me is too much. It's going to be too bulky. Of course, I also know that I'm going to add another layer right behind the head. So if this one's a little thin, I know I've got that last one that can fill up a bit. So that looks a little bit better. A little less volume. Wrap it around the hook, or around the thread. And right there she goes. Yeah. Boom. So you see the taper? So it comes up. This is about the end of the second layer. It's a little long, but I think it's going to be okay. But that looks pretty good. Let's do it again for the blue. So our blue's in. Now we need another shot of chartreuse on the side, or on, I should say, both sides. Alright, she's looking pretty good so far. Now before we fill up that gap right there at the head, I want to put in some crazy legs. So this is going to further emphasize the chartreuse, right? So these guys, when we tie them in, they drape down, but when they're in the water, they fold back against the body and they kind of flutter. Put those right over top, right where our thread is. Make sure they're somewhat even. Do want the two strands to stay together if at all possible. There we go. So from here, it's all about touch. So I want to take the thread, go across and behind, no pressure whatsoever. All right, and then come underneath, still behind. Come up from underneath, and then cross over and go in front. No pressure whatsoever. Right? So now I'm going to line these up. I can actually pick up the silicone and move it back and forth. There's no pressure here. Okay? So get them together. Get them so that they're roughly the same length. Of course, we'll cut the ends. So that looks good to me. Now I'm going to pull them back. Again, no pressure. Bring it once, twice in front, right behind the head. And once I'm happy, hold it and straight down. And then 1, 2 more. So what that does is you made an X on top of the silicone. No pressure, bringing it over, under, back over. And so that completes the X. Still no pressure, 2 in front, right behind the head. That's your last shot. So as soon as you are happy with it, pull it down, and it cinches that whole system down without pulling one way and then pulling the other way. So that is that. And lastly, we need to fill in the gap there now behind the head. So I don't like there to be space, or even if I can get away with it, I don't even want to see a collar on this. So I'm going to put blue on top, white on the bottom. We don't need any more chartreuse. And let's fill in the gap there on the top and the bottom. All right, we've got it all in. Now the only thing left to do is whip finish. 1, 2, 3, 4. I do like to hold the material as I cinch that down. And try not to cut your silicone. Done that a couple of times. And we'll get a bodkin and some Sally Hansen's, not Sally Hansen's, loom. Some loom and a bodkin. Since you can't see, or I didn't want to see that much of the thread collar, we can use the bodkin here to get sealant on the threads. Alright. Only thing left to do now is brush it out And we need to cut our silicone crazy legs free. Let's do that. Cut our flashabou. So I like the flashabou. See, it's way longer than the tail. I actually like the flashabou to be about 3/4 of the length, but you cut it to your desired length. I like it to be just short of the end of the tail. And then we're actually going to take this guy out and grab a little brush here. This is a Stanfo Italy. I got it on Amazon. It's got Velcro on one side. Great for dubbing brushes, and then dubbing loops, dubbing brushes, and then this tiny little comb. That on the other. It's just right. But you can use the Walmart comb that we used earlier, whatever. And just want to blend now. So we're going to blend this. You can use your fingers some. Blend that all together. Take out any loose pieces. Flip it over. Yeah. This is when she comes alive. And then in the water, right, we've got all these stacked layers. The beautiful thing is that in the water, when sometimes I like to give it a little pinch. See, do you guys see that? See how you can kind of still see, if you look real hard, I can kind of still see through where that pearl polar chenille is, right? Water flow gets in between of each of those layers, and it creates kind of this breathing motion. It's really cool. So looks like our tail is just about right. We got our taper from head, shoulders here, and on down to the tail. I think she turned out pretty decent. What do you guys think? Like it? Chartreuse Sexy Shad with a stout barbarian hook and all synthetic body material. Pretty sweet. Let me get some close-up shots for you guys, and obviously we got to take it over to the test tank and see how it swims. Well, you guys be the judge, but from my take, I'd say that's a winner, and a chicken dinner. I mean, come on, that thing looked awesome in the test tank. I think the chartreuse totally worked. When it got up in the current, you could see the flashabou glinting in the light. Yep, I'm satisfied. I think that's a good one. So hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video and you agree it's pretty dope. Love to hear what you think of this build in the comments. Love to hear what you think about a little longer format, you know, permitting me to geek out a little bit too. So if you enjoyed that, let me know. If you're like, dude, cut it out, then hey, let me know. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. As I said, if you'd like to see more lure building videos just like it, then click on this video right here. If you're curious why I call the channel SDG, then click on this video right here. Otherwise, until the next time, I'll see you guys at the Vice.